here on line number 6. Say good morning to the independent member of the House of Assembly for Mount Pearl Southlands, Paul Lane. Morning, Paul. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you this morning?
Very well. How about you?
I am best kind, sir. Paddy, I wanted to have a quick comment about, waste management. Before I do, though, I just want to wish Richard Gillett the very best. I hope that the situation can be resolved as quickly as possible because, and it's unfortunate that it's come to this, but, we certainly don't want to see the man do anything that's going to jeopardize his health. So hopefully we'll see some resolution soon. I mean, I don't pretend to know a whole lot about the fishery. I mean, the only wharf we have in Mount Pearl is the little one down in Powers Pond, to be quite honest. But I do know it's very complex. I know there's a lot of issues, inshore versus offshore and issues with the unions and processing versus harvesting and all those things. But I think the bottom line is here, as I see it at least, is that, there's been so many decisions made over the years around the fishery. And, if, as you have said, if the minister, whoever that minister might be, is going to be making these decisions and bringing forth policies and so on, I think they owe it to the people impacted to at least have open dialogue and explain their decisions. Now, whether we necessarily agree with the answers or not, that's one thing. But at the very least, they have, the responsibility to say, these are the decisions we're making in these areas, and this is the reason why we're doing it, and have an opportunity for, like I said, the stakeholders to have their voices heard and at least understand the rationale behind some decisions being made.
Well, of course.
That's fair and reasonable, I think.
Well, of course it is. And it's not just about cabin country and $180 a year to pick up the garbage. It's about how are we going to deal with the trucking of garbage all over God's creation when it comes to the carbon tax? How are we going to address what has been the loss of revenue from municipalities with the closure of their landfill? And some of those were big industrial landfill sites, and that's huge money out of the coffers of some of these towns. So inside of all that, how did that influence their thought process to go to this new waste management regime, which is across the province? So at this point, we really haven't heard much about it. And this is, if someone had asked me 7 or 8 years ago, is it going to be a big deal? I would have said yes. But it just sort of came, it was implemented, and the biggest pushback we've seen is over $180, not about the other big questions.
Well, yeah, I've had numerous conversations with Eastern Waste Management as an example, because I have constituents who, have cabins up in Deer Park and Triangle Pond and all these different areas, of course, up to Southern Shore and La Manche and so on. And, one of the things that was told to me, and I understand where people talk about this whole issue of, they go up for the weekend and they'll burn some of the garbage in their fire pits, and then they'll take the cans, whatever, and bring them home. And I'm sure that's true. One of the things that has been told to me, though, is that one of the bigger issues that maybe doesn't get the whole lot of attention that perhaps it should was the issue of the bigger bulk items like couches and water boilers, all that stuff that was thrown in the woods and so on in different areas, because it was, that's not something that you would throw aboard your car in a Dominion bag and bring home, put in your garbage. And those are one of the things that at least they've told me, and maybe this is some of the information that, needs to get out to people. But, I look back at when it was implemented, first being implemented. I was a member of, I was on the board of Municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador at the time, and I remember holding a public meeting in Whitburn, brought in people from Eastern Waste Management and from the department and so on. And one of the things that came out of it was, in order to make the waste management process work for people and to keep the cost down to, a couple of $100 per person in all the communities, is that they needed to have a critical mass in each area. So I think that perhaps now part of the issue is that in order to achieve a critical mass in some of these areas, to keep the cost down to a certain level for, say, people living in some of these, rural communities surrounding the cabin country, then they need to bring as many people into it as possible to all pay to keep the cost down for everybody. Now, I think I believe that that's part of it, and maybe that's something that Eastern Waste can be questioned on, but I believe that that's part of the issue. And the other thing I just want to say about it as well is that I received a letter from Eastern Waste Management, just for the information of, I guess, everybody, and in particular my constituents. I got a copy of a letter from Eastern Waste Management about a month or so ago, in which they were notifying people in certain areas around Deer Park, Triangle Pond, so on, that fire services were now being implemented, and it was going to cost them. It was pretty good. I think it was like $50 a year, and it was cabin areas that were being serviced by the Holyrood Fire Department, and they're now going to be charged an additional $50 for fire protection. Now, I've talked to a couple of people who got those letters, and the couple of people I talked to actually said it was a good thing because once they got that, they brought it to their insurance company, and their insurance rates on their cabins actually went down more than $50. So in that case, it benefited them. So that was a good thing. But I guess the point is that this has gone to some people, and I expect that that's going to be expanded over time. So people, if you never got it this year, because I think it's being done as a pilot, but don't be surprised if, say, next year and the year after, people in other cabin areas are going to be receiving letters, similar letters, that we're now moving into fire protection. And I think the plan over time is that you can take this as far as you want. I mean, right now it's waste. You can add fire. You can start adding snow clearing. There's an endless list of services you can keep adding, right? And over time, perhaps that's where we're going.
Well, fire protection, I think, is a bit of a standalone. For the obvious reasons. I mean, think of the stories that we saw coming out of Western Newfoundland, where out in cabin country, they had the option to hook up with a neighboring community for fire protection services. Because of the initial cost, people said no to it. And then what happened? Cabin burnt to the ground. And they very quickly go back to the well and say, maybe we should give this a second look.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think what we're seeing, and I think, municipalities of Newfoundland and Labrador have been saying this for a long time, by the way, Paddy. And like I said, I served on the board. And, that when it comes to these non-incorporated areas, local service districts and so on, there's a lot of areas where, there's people who don't have these services, and there's areas where people are, I guess, benefiting from the services, but they're not paying any taxes into it. And one of the things that municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador, has been pushing for has been for regional authorities. And I think you're going to see a movement towards that to make things sustainable, I guess, in the long run. But as that happens, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see all these areas that were classified, I guess, as cabin country are now going to be drawn into the bigger regional areas, and then they're going to be, expected to pay the same as someone who's actually living all year round in a residence that would be close to those cabin areas. Seems like that's where it's going.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on it and ask a few questions about it. Appreciate your time this morning, Paul.
Not a problem, Penny. All the very best, and always great talking to you. Have a good one.
My pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. All right, bye.